We welcome you back to part 2 of episode 3 of our Climate and Health podcast, Truth, Courage, and Solutions. I'm Maya, and I'm here once again with Parker, your co-host for part 2. The first half of this episode, we chatted with Kari and Bonnie from Grow, Crosse, on their nonprofit organization. For part 2, we welcome Dan Miller, a local La Crosse area farmer from St. Joseph's Ridge who practices sustainable farming.
So Dan, do you mind telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got into sustainable farming practices?
Sure. I grew up on a small dairy farm up by St. Joseph Ridge, actually on the other side, on the west side of St. Joe's, where my parents still do farm. But like most kids growing up on a small farm, your parents told you, go to school and get a good job, and then you can come back if you want. Well, so I went to Marquette, got an engineering degree, came back, got into the construction business as my first job. But then my wife and I decided that we wanted to start our own farm business. And so, like most, we started out with just the conventional approach to agriculture. You know, no-till corn, no-till soybeans, spray everything with Roundup and hope for the best. And did that for a few years, and then my wife had a breast cancer scare at a pretty young age, which caused us to start rethinking and trying to connect the dots and why is this kind of stuff happening when we're healthy. She runs marathons, you know, there are no real apparent risk factors on why something like that would happen. And that kind of led us to start redirecting our farming practices more towards the organic realm. And within organic, then kind of expounded upon that and got more into what some people would consider regenerative. The challenge right now is regenerative is a really hot buzzword, but there's no real hard and fast definition of what that is. Other subsets of farming, you know, we talk no-till farming. Well, that's pretty simple. We're not going to till, we're going to plant our crops, and we're going to spray everything with chemicals to kill the weeds. So that's a pretty defined subset. The regenerative on the other side is a little bit harder to put your finger on what exactly it is. There's no real hard defined set of practices. So I guess in our case, I define it more loosely as we're farming in a manner that's going to leave the soil health and leave the farm in a better condition when we're done than when we got it. So I take that personally to mean I'm looking to improve soil organic matter, I'm looking to improve soil health, and I'm looking to improve the fertility of the soil, all while I'm trying to increase my crop yields and improve the profitability of my business along the way. So that's how we define it. If you go on YouTube and start looking at regenerative ag, you're going to get a whole host of different things. You know, probably the biggest name out there in terms of regenerative ag is Gabe Brown. He's out in North Dakota. He's doing things, a bunch of different things. But kind of the uniqueness of agriculture is a lot of it obviously is going to be dependent upon topography, weather, markets, you know, where you are and what you can grow and how you weave all that into a regenerative method is kind of the art form of it.
Cool. Thanks for taking the time to tell us about that and how you came to be, essentially. So you kind of touched on it, but can you describe what regenerative agriculture is, like specific practices, like maybe the common across all people who do regenerative agriculture? Or
Sure. So a couple of the commonalities of it, you know, one is cover crops are a big focus, which is essentially trying to have something growing in the soil year round, or at least when it's not frozen and covered with snow in our case.
Especially around here.
Right. In that specific topic brings with it a host of associated benefits and how it plays into more of the fight against climate change, which is, you know, cover crops typically are growing with the idea that you're sequestering carbon with them, because you're creating plant matter that's going to then stay in the soil. It's not something that you're taking off and harvesting. So cover crops are one focus. Another focus, and what I mentioned came brown, is how do we marry up crop production with animal production in the most efficient manner. So in our case, another subset of our farm business, aside from the organic crops, is grass-fed beef, which we do with rotational grazing. So that's another aspect that leads down the regenerative path. So and then on a more conventional manner is more the no-till approach, which is that you're going to see that pushed a lot more within the conventional farming realm. And what I mean by that is we'll plant cover crops, we'll no-till our cash crop into it, and then we'll use chemicals to kill everything, the weeds, the cover crop, and everything. You're going to gain some soil organic matter doing that, but it's more heavily dependent upon chemicals, obviously, which is what, at least in my approach, what we're trying to wean ourselves off of.
And I feel like no-till, that's more like what I hear. I feel like when I have talked to people about farming and like a change towards farming, I guess. That is a real heavy focus. Yeah. Tillage has got a bad reputation. Yeah. Because when done improperly, it can lead to erosion, and it can lead to burning off the organic matter, because when you till, you're introducing oxygen, which creates a flush of microbes, which burns up soil carbon. So when it's not done right, it has negative effects. But I can also tell you from personal experience, because I've farmed with both methods, and actually I still have some conventional no-till farms, particularly on farms that are leased, where for whatever reason the landlord doesn't want to see organic farming or whatnot. I can tell you from my experience that I experience a higher degree of erosion and certainly poor soil health where I'm no-tilling and using chemicals than where I'm using tillage in organic methods. Okay. So but the conventional world is very heavily focused on no-till. The cynic in me says, because the conventional world is also dominated by about 3 or 4 global chemical companies, that there might be some money involved there that's really forcing the no-till issue, because there's a lot of products and then can in turn be sold to support that.
No, that makes sense. That's interesting too. How big is your farm acre-wise?
So we are small by a lot of accounts, but I consider ourselves to be mid-sized in that we farm about 650 acres. Okay. So there's certainly some smaller than us. There's certainly a lot bigger than us. So we're kind of in that middle range.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like farms are, like, I actually grew up, my grandpa had a farm, didn't work out, and I feel like that tends to be a problem nowadays. So do you notice that with, I guess, because I'm sure you know farmers around the area, are their farms going? And
yeah, it's agriculture is definitely a business that's based on economies of scale. Yeah. So it's going to forever lead itself to growth and bigger farms and consolidation. In order to try to break that cycle, like we have, you have to find the niche markets. So you have to play in the organic realm. You have to look to grass-fed beef. There's other little niches where you can differentiate yourself from just growing number 2 corn and soybeans, and in turn gain a profit premium, which plays to the bottom line unless you stay in business. Yeah. So I could not be profitable with my size if I was just strictly conventional corn and soybeans. The returns aren't there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So how does regenerative agriculture affect those in the local community?
Depends on which side of regenerative you're talking about. So I can tell you on the crop side that I see a lot less erosion, which means there's a lot less sediment and pollution heading down over the hill into the creeks and into the Mississippi. I can tell you that my soil health and my organic matter are improving, which leads to better rain infiltration, which means that I've got less water heading down and flooding downstream. On the rotational grazing side, it's really interesting. I think if we could all just eat beef and didn't eat crops, that's probably the best regenerative system, because basically what you're trying to do is mimic what the buffalo were doing before the invention of the plow and conventional farming. So in that scenario, you're seeing a lot more pollinator habitat. You're seeing a lot more wildlife with birds and meadowlarks and that kind of thing, because you're only, like in our farm on the beef side, we've got about 75 acres for round numbers that's in pasture. But we divide that to where we're moving the cattle somewhere new every single day. So if you take a slice of that pasture, there's only cattle on it for about 3 days a year, because we're continuously moving them around the farm. And so all those other times of the year, the grass is growing, the legumes are growing, the bees have a place to go, the birds have a place to nest. So to me, that's the ultimate scenario. But unfortunately, we need more than just beef products, which is why I mentioned Gabe Brown, because he has worked or is working through methods of how to incorporate the two of them between rotational grazing and crops. But in North Dakota, you're dealing with wide open, flat expanses that are a lot easier to do that. Our topography doesn't really work to that. Mm-hmm. So we still have to keep the two processes separate. But if I could pick to where I just focus on one and point to regenerative, that one really does have huge improvements. I mean, there's virtually zero runoff because you've got grass covering all year round. And we've since, kind of a side note, but we've got an individual that has a commercial honey and beekeeping business. So he brings hives out to the farm and stages them there for the warm months out of the year. And then they actually just picked them up last week and moved them to Florida. But it all ties together and complements itself really well.
Yeah, it's all interconnected, kind of. That's cool.
Yeah, I didn't even think about pollinators and all with rotational grazing, so that's actually really cool. So
very, very cool.
Mm-hmm.
What can the general population do to support regenerative farming?
So one of the things, which I'm sure you've heard of, is kind of the buy local movement. You can support your local farmers, buy as much as you can local from your local farmers. That keeps the dollars local and helps those that are trying to spearhead this movement, helps them remain profitable. Because by and large, it is the smaller and the mid-sized farmers that are really trying to push this. So that's one thing. The other thing is a lot of this stuff is hard to do without program support. So in my instance, La Crosse County, their land conservation office, is an instrumental partner. And the reason that is because specifically with the cover crops, which is a real focus of theirs, those are hard to do, especially initially until you figure out the system, because looking at it from purely a business perspective, it's a cost that isn't making you any money. And there's cost to seed, cost to plant, cost to terminate that cover crop. And when you look at just a P&L statement, you're not generating any more profit by doing that.
Yeah.
So they step in to help with some grant programs and stuff and funding that help offset some of those initial costs till you can really get the system going and figure out how to do it. So those kind of programs are really important, and Farm Service Agency through their National Resources Consulting Office also helps with that. So I know when people see in the news the farm bill and grant programs that come out, they think, oh, there's just more free money going to the farmers. Well, in those particular cases, a lot of this stuff doesn't happen without that, because at the end of the day, we've got to run a business, which has to be just focused on profitability, or we wouldn't stay in business. Mm-hmm. So those kind of programs help fill that gap.
That's cool. I didn't know La Crosse had that type of program?
They do. They've come at it both from cover crops, and then because there's been, other than this year with the drought, past years there's been so much issue with flooding and runoffs from ridgetop farms like I'm on. So not only are they trying to tackle with grant programs for cover crops, but also for dam structures and erosion control and that manner of thing, trying to slow down all this runoff that's headed down and flooding the valleys communities below.
So weather-wise, do you guys, because now you said now we have a drought problem, does that affect your farming as well?
Certainly did this year.
Okay, I was wondering.
Yeah, this year was, and I've been at this on my own for about 18 years, and this was certainly the worst year we've ever had in terms of drought.
Okay.
Prior to this year, we've had those 5, 6, 7-inch rain events.
Yeah.
Which is obviously a whole different set of challenges. But so it's something different every year. Prior to this year with the drought, you certainly are seeing a much higher degree or frequency of those extreme rain events, which I gotta believe once the drought pattern breaks here that we probably go back to that.
Okay. Optimistic for it, kind of?
Yeah. It's never a good thing to get 4, 5, 6 inches of rain at a time. There's just nowhere for it to go. But I can still grow a crop if I've got extra rain. I can't grow a crop if I have none. So that's where we were this year. So
yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sure that's no fun.
Yeah,
I know. I don't even think about it. Honestly, like La Crosse doesn't really publicize, I would say, farming. Around here.
Yeah.
Like, you don't hear about it, you don't see about it. So that was why I was kind of excited to interview, because I'm like, nobody really talks about farming in this area.
Well, it's a very small population of us that are actually doing it. You know, in terms of sheer population, it's a pretty small percentage that have connections to it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Because, like, where I came from, 4-H was, like, a huge thing, and, like, Future Farmers of America were huge. Is that big in this community or not so much?
There's some people still involved in it. I guess I've got 4 kids at home and none of them are involved in it. And that's just my personal experience. I think some of the outlying schools like Cashton and Bangor, they have FFA programs and that kind of thing. My kids were in 4-H for a very short time, largely because we just didn't have time for one more thing. But I think 4-H has kind of morphed into more of I'll call it the suburban version of FFA, where it's, you know, the people that have 5 and 10 acre farms and a little project for the kids that's my stereotype. It could be just what I know, which isn't everything by any means. So
maybe it'd be interesting just starting something up, getting word spread more.
Do you sell to like produce at the co-op, any stores around here, or do you have a little shop by your farm or something?
So I'd love to, and I would if I didn't have the construction side of my job too.
Oh, true.
We do sell grass finished beef off the farm. It's a small part of our business. It certainly could be a much larger part. I know that there's others, like I have a family member that owns another organic and grazing farm up on the ridge that they operate under St. Bridget's Meadow as their, and they have a website where you can order individual steaks through the website and they'll deliver it to you, and so that's a whole nother business in and of itself. We haven't really ventured into that, just largely due to a lack of available time.
Totally.
You're busy.
Yeah.
You're a busy man. When looking for more information on regenerative agriculture, we came across the concept of more from less, referring to producing more from less in terms of less land, less input of chemicals, less use of water, less emission of greenhouse gases, less risk of soil degradation, and less use of energy-based inputs. Do you have any thoughts or insights on this concept?
Yeah, I think in my case, the way that I see my methods playing into that is certainly the organic side brings obviously less chemicals because you're not using any.
Yeah.
It's less petroleum-based fertilizers because you're not using any. It's less, as I mentioned before, in my instance, it's less erosion, less pollution. So it's certainly that's how I see my practices tying into that. And with the rotational grazing side, it's certainly less because the only inputs in that case you have are the cattle that are eating the grass. I think on the conventional side of the game, their version of more or less is using synthetics and synthetic fertilizers to boost yields, so that you're producing more off of less acres. Obviously, there's trade-offs with everything, but that's how it's seen on the conventional side.
Well, thanks for the insight. So moving on to everyone's favorite GMOs, genetically modified organisms. They have potential to improve crop yields, enhance nutritional quality, and mitigate the impacts of climate change, and are often touted as a potential solution to the food security challenge. And they offer a promising avenue for developing crops that can better withstand these changing conditions. Drought-tolerant or heat-tolerant crops could maintain or even increase yields under less favorable growing conditions, thereby mitigating the impacts of climate change on food production. And in today's society, someone says GMO, and people are kind of like, oh my gosh, like, right. Even you get these like food packages like GMO free.
Yeah, they put those labels on packages that could possibly contain GMOs anyway. Because
I always think that. Yeah.
So, with all this in mind, can you touch on the topic and the benefits the GMOs have, and if you have used any in your farming practice?
So I certainly have used GMO corn and soybeans. I still will this coming year on my conventional farm. The thing with GMOs is, in most cases, they don't actually increase yield, they protect yield. So what I mean by that is, so one of the original GMOs was corn that had a gene inserted in it that would kill worms and insects that would feed on the corn. So still, the genetics are what are providing the yield potential. It's that protein that they inserted into the corn to kill the insect that's protecting that insect from stealing that yield away. So in a lot of ways, it's protecting yield more than increasing the yield. There are other methods of protecting yield, which in my case, the organic side, because we can't use GMOs, we're relying on crop rotation and that manner of thing to try to eliminate the source of the problem versus just treating the problem, if you will, by killing the insects off. From what I see, the real downside to GMOs is in most cases, it leads to more chemical use. So the most popular versions of GMOs are those that are where crops are bred to withstand chemicals. So they're sold in that, well, we're going to go with GMO corn so that we can go no-till, and then we'll use Roundup, which will reduce our reliance on other chemicals. The dirty truth to that is it's been so overused that now in the conventional world we're going back to using chemicals that we used in the 80s and 90s because the Roundups don't work to kill anything anymore because the plants have evolved resistance to it. The insects have evolved resistance to it. So they'll sell it and tell you that the GMOs are going to reduce chemical use, but in fact they're actually increasing chemical use in reality because their nature's evolving and fighting resistance to it. Isn't to say though that they're all bad. They definitely, and I don't know if it's the GMO part or the genetic improvement part, but we mentioned drought just a little bit ago, and I can tell you that the conventional crops that are GMO did withstand drought and perform better than the organic ones did this year. So there is some truth to it, but it's not all roses like they want to. The GMOs are not going to solve every problem that we have. There's a place for them, but at least how I see it, there's a lot of negatives that come with them as well. And there are, take for example, like this year I had a contract where I produced high protein soybeans going to be used for salmon and fish food. They're not GMO. It's a different technology where they're using CRISPR and other procedures to enhance the genetics of the plant without actually inserting the GMO part. So, like I said, there's pluses and minuses. I just see with GMOs, in my estimation, the minuses tend to outweigh the positives.
That was actually really interesting.
I know. I was
I've heard of
super
CRISPR
interested
in like
that.
a genetics class, and like doing it on humans to like use like modified genes to get rid of diseases and stuff, which is a own ethical issue on its own.
Right.
But when you talked about the Roundup, how it doesn't work anymore, it also reminded me, like, because we're healthcare students, of like antibiotic resistance and how like the overuse of antibiotics on just like minor things, or someone not taking them completely, and then bacteria becomes resistant to it, and then it's like back to the dark ages of medicine before the antibiotics.
And that's where we're at in the conventional farming world. I mean, Roundup is actually, I think the use is really dropping because it doesn't work anymore. It'll kill grass, but it won't kill. Won't kill
you
broadleaf.
have it in your garage for your grass, and that's about it.
That's all it'll kill. It's not going to kill the broadleaves that we face, and like your water hemps and stuff like that. They laugh at it. It doesn't kill it anymore. From the insect side, the initial one, the BT protein that I mentioned to kill the insects that go after corn, that doesn't really work anymore. So now they're going back to insecticides to kill the insects because the protein, they've grown immune to it. So it's a continual race for new technologies to insert into this stuff to stay one step ahead of nature and try to, instead of looking more at a way, how do we farm more in harmony with nature instead of just trying to one up it all the time.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that.
Like, we're better than nature. No, it's just all like find a
Let's
way
get
to
along, right?
Yeah, like we're all connected here. Let's try to figure it out.
Yeah, we'll see. I wonder what farming will look like 10 years from now.
Yeah, I don't know. I know the march toward bigger farms and consolidation, you're going to see a lot more, and at least what I think is you're going to see a lot more automation.
Yeah.
Because labor is an issue with anything. You can't find enough people to do the tasks. So you're going to see a lot of automation. You're going to see, I think AI is probably going to play a huge role in farming because you're going to see, with automation, you're going to see machine learning. So they're going to they've already started on John Deere, and a couple other ones are pushing technologies where as you drive through the field with a sprayer, instead of broadcasting spray over the entire field, it's going to just look for a water hemp weed and just spray that instead as you're driving through the field. So
that would be good.
Technology is going to play an ever-increasing role
in
those things.
That's nuts.
But as for what we're planting and how we're doing it, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, you just need people to keep supporting it, really.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of bringing it back to the La Crosse Climate Action Plan that we've been focusing on. Strategy 3 of the Food and Agriculture section in it pointed at protecting and preserving the agricultural land in La Crosse, making mention to the vast amount of land that we are losing every hour across the United States. How would you acknowledge that your practices are contributing to the protection and preservation of the land in La Crosse area?
If we talk about preservation of farmland, the first step is to keep it in profitable farming production and not build houses on it. Mm-hmm. I've been fortunate to have the Franciscan Sisters as a landlord and partner on the Villa farm up there, which, due to its proximity to St. Joe's, if they weren't emphasizing keeping it farming, I'm pretty sure there'd be houses on there in no time. So just having profitable farming operations is the first step, because like anything, it's a business that has to remain profitable to keep the land in farming production. But then if you look more specifically at how I'm trying to do things, again, as I mentioned, it's trying to protect the soil as the main resource of the farm through cover crops and cutting erosion and improving soil health and soil fertility, and trying to ensure that my kids talk about at some point being involved in the farm, that I'm turning a land base over to them to farm that's in better condition than when I started. That's my goal, and that's how I feel I'm contributing to the overall goal.
Oh, yeah.
Sweet. So we like to end each interview and episode with like tangible things that anyone can do and implement into their own lives. So in terms of food and agriculture, or just anything you want to share about sustainability and climate change, what could individuals do at the individual level to help mitigate the climate crisis?
Well, not to touch on the same things again, but I think the easiest thing an individual can do, because these are all very large topics, very large issues, right?
Yeah.
So to try to break it down to something that the individual can do, I think it gets back to buying local, supporting your local economy. I think extends outside agriculture too.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we can support local business and keep our dollars local versus going on Amazon and having it delivered to our door.
Mm-hmm.
If we can keep those dollars local and recycling with our own community, it benefits all of us. But taken more strictly from a food and farming perspective, it gets back to that by buying local, supporting your local farmer. Obviously, from my viewpoint, buying organic if you can and supporting
mm-hmm.
that helps those of us that are trying to spearhead this. Gives us profitable markets to sell into.
Yeah, I would agree with the buying local thing. And like you stated, these are a really big topic. That's why we kind of want to break it down
Mm-hmm.
for anyone listening so they can just incorporate it into their own lives. Like, for me, I don't order from Amazon because I just don't like the company. So that's just my own thing. And I always try to buy local. Because La Crosse has so many, like, cute little, like, local coffee shops or, like, anything. Like, I'd rather just go there than like McDonald's or something.
Yeah.
Personally, but
yeah, that's probably the easiest thing that anybody can do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're given the choice of the national company over here or a local service that's doing the same thing, and it might cost you a few bucks more because there's economies of scale that come with those larger businesses, and
mm-hmm.
they're able to offer the same product for less. But if we can afford it, to spend another $1 or $2 more, but keep that local, that's good. That helps the local economy in our situation.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for being a part of our podcast.
No problem.
Yeah.
We need business goals that are bigger than doing less harm or emitting less carbon. The goal has to be what the planet needs, a climate fit for life. And we need optimism and courage to get there, maybe more than we need science or data. And with that, we wrap up episode 3 of Truth, Courage, and Solutions, a Climate and Health podcast. I want to take the time to thank Dan again for coming on here and talking to us about regenerative agriculture, a farming and ranching style that nourishes both people and the earth. For our next episode, we will be transitioning to health and safety, where you will hear from speakers Cameron and Shonda. Thank you very much.